We've established that the main challenge in housing finance is in aligning the realities of household incomes to the reality of the unit economics of cost on the housing supply side. In essence, what that means is number one, income is too low and too unstable to meet lending criteria. And two, housing suppliers in the form of builders, contractors, and developers are not charity organizations. And so they have to make profit on their investments in housing. And I think once we've identified the problem, we can also see the roadmap for how to solve these problems, especially as it relates to the Nigerian context. Because, of course, one road does not enter markets. But then we must also be very careful to not just copy paste things that are done in other areas, that their realities are different from our own. And the number one is the income level in Nigeria is really low, and Nigeria falls within the topmost nations with the highest income to cost housing ratio. So, what can we do to ensure that housing finance trickles down to the grassroots, to the people that need it the most, rather than creating policy that only enriches a few or that further deepens the housing crisis? So if the problem is the mismatch between the demand and the supply side, and we know income is too low, and yet developers cannot sell at the expense of their profits. So the number one goal should be, how do we help buyers afford housing while equally helping providers sell at very fair price without losing value or profit? But because we are aware of the peculiarity that on the demand side, there is a large number of people that work within the informal sector. So we must also bring them into that conversation by making sure that we make it easy for people in the informal sector to access housing finance. And for those people, we must optimize the value chain to reduce reliance on suppliers. How do we combine these two goals into meaningful tactics or into meaningful strategies? So number one, we must raise income to ensure that earning power increases to improve lending or buying power. Number two, we must restructure housing policies to extend and cover even those that work within the informal sector. Number three, we must provide incentives and subsidies to cushion profitability for suppliers. And equally on the demand side, that is, provide subsidies directly in forms of housing loans and credits. This will help more people to access housing directly through self-help assisted programs. And then ultimately, we must rethink how we fund, how we build, and how we own homes. You can start to see how the amount of possibilities of interventions that can happen from this framework are unlimited. But what I will personally dwell more on is rethinking how we fund, build, and own homes. To see how well we can play around cost from the supply side and see how we can help demand side absorb these costs themselves. And a simple way to achieve this, especially for cities like Lagos, is through community-led housing. The interesting thing is, these are instruments that we are familiar with already. Cooperative societies, age groups, co-op housing, fractional ownerships, integrated partnerships. They are easy to adopt and adapt to the realities of cities and city dwellers. I hope this helps.